Hello and welcome back to Devil's Gambit. We'll be continuing where we left off, which, if you recall, is after Cadgan and Rian were spying on Silvareth. Silvareth was basically looking for them, but they were literally hiding in the shadows and spying on him the entire time. They were trying to suss out the type of person he is, and what exactly he's doing there, why exactly he's looking for them, but really, they got surface level information about him. Not really his motives or anything more than that. They did, however, sort of reveal their plan as to why they're spying on him and how they're going to use him against Manuel, and I guess in a way to hopefully stop this whole expedition thing. But yeah. We also got another little bit of a glimpse as to how Rian and Cadgan operate within the same body. Either or one of them is always in control, but the other one is still also there. They're literally just floating nearby when the other one is in control. Also, we found out that Teresa also knows about Cadgan and Rian. She is privy to the information that these two are sharing the same body, that they're one and the same, and that they are basically, I guess, brothers in a way. But yeah. So a little bit more backstory about Rian and Cadgan, but also some interesting details about Silvareth, especially about a weird thing going on with his stomach. But yeah. We'll be going into a little bit more about that today, actually, because the update is titled Silvareth. It is all about him. But yeah, anyways, so without further ado, let us continue Devil's Gambit. Act 2, Chapter 12, Silvareth. That which has been touched by the eye has a complex relationship with nature. For instance, one might look at the valley and think, why doesn't the Inquisition just burn it all to the ground? But nature isn't helpless. The eye can grow its influence and contaminate life, but that ability isn't exclusive to it. For instance, ponder the fearsome dusk viper. While the eye's touch has irreversibly changed its body, nature turns that influence against the eye by using it as a deterrent against entering the valley. And in the case that this deterrent is ignored, the dusk viper delivers certain death, ironically preventing the eye's influence from spreading to other beings. I can see why Irnan is so cautious of Hector then. The fact that he was able to neutralize one of the valley's threats sets a dangerous precedent. He may have been trying to save a life, but he still made the eye ever so slightly easier to reach and process. It'd be for the best if he does nothing else until this is all over. Me and Rian, we aren't too different from the Dusk Viper. We play the same role, and so does the Eye's magic. While some of the ancient Renanian sigils existed to invoke the Eye's power, many of them turned that power to the benefit of nature. These people were still alien to the Eye after all. They had hungers and needs only nature could satisfy. It's likely that at some point in history, the Eye's school of magic did more to hurt it than to spread its influence. So despite the terrible power that fuels it, preserving ancient Renanian magic and sigils has been one of our family's duties since time immemorial. Our blood dad in particular enjoyed that duty. He used to say that it helped him relax. Not even Rian could keep count of how many afternoons we spent here with him, researching and carving sigils. But it's still forbidden magic, so all of them would wind up hidden in the church's hideout. He did his best to keep them organized in the workshop's drawers, and only he knew the logic behind said order, so I try not to move anything too much as I dig around for one particular sigil. Are you sure that it's here? Maybe we don't need it. I'd like to have a safeguard. We'll be in a very vulnerable position if anything goes wrong. Rian's impatience sizzles in the background of our mind, but he chooses to remain silent. Here it is. It's a simple sigil engraved into a medallion. The two runes that form it have long been forgotten by most, but the effect is simple. It warms up its surroundings. The only difference from the woven sigil with the same function is that this one works using the eye's magic. I wonder if I could fasten it to my hand. Rain's eyes trail off to a pair of Dad's old gloves that by now have been resting on a table for almost a decade. I'd rather not disturb anything here, but given our circumstances, I'm sure that he'd understand. We leave the hideout with the glove in hand and the sigil inside of it. Normally I'd rather have Rain doing the roaming around, but this time I'm in charge. We won't be able to hide our smell, and Rain's far too recognizable for his own good. The sun has fallen. Few people remain in the streets, and Derry is in the middle of his journey to light every lamp in town. We wait in the alleyway between two shops, within good view of a nearby tavern. We see wolves and lions occasionally enter or leave. More importantly though, through a window, Silvareth's massive silhouette sitting by a bar. It's hard to miss him. Our hunter instincts take control. Hidden in the shadows, barely moving, breathing only when the wind blows, we wait. First for him to go upstairs, then for the patrons to leave, and finally for the last drunken stragglers to disperse. Only then we move. Chanting under my breath, I make my way into the tavern, and from there, head upstairs. It's not hard to find his room, with his ashy smell. I suppose he shares that weakness with Rain. I get on my knees, press my ears against the wood, and listen. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Silvareth is snoring. It's only at the 20th mark that Rain finally loses his patience. I'm grateful that he even lasted that long, and asks if we can proceed. With a nod, I unlock the door, and after waiting for an unexpected sound, we go inside. They say lions lose all their dignity when they snore. Seems like that is true for the Inquisitor too. Not taking my eyes off of Silvareth for even an instant, I put the glove on with the sigil still inside, and they lay down on the floor. This is hard. I thought that it'd be easier for me than for Rain, but relaxing enough to fall asleep next to a man out to kill me is a challenge, even for my self-control. Still, I close my eyes and slow down my breathing. Think of Irnan. Think of Hector. Count how many sigils you had to dig through today. Little by little, my consciousness does become fuzzier. For a moment, I become aware of the quietness of the night. The wind hitting the window, the trees stirring in the distance. Both are drowned out by Silvareth's snoring every few seconds. It's hard to keep track of when they stop, but they eventually do, and everything truly goes dark. An unfamiliar soil, an unfamiliar sound, an unfamiliar smell. I look down at my feet, at the grain-like thing between my toes. Is this sand? As I raise my gaze, I'm welcomed by a mass of gentle waves rocking the beach. A green sea and a clear blue sky expand endlessly across the horizon. Behind us, several meters away, is a path cutting through trees and bushes, leading into thick, inscrutable woods. I see smoke rising above the trees from far away. Before I can gather my thoughts, Rain is already kicking up sand behind him as he runs to feel the seawater on his feet. Behold the endless ocean. In so many tales that I heard about you, and now we finally meet. A whole new world for the devil of Roddio to conquer. Your bounty will belong to me, and soon every fish and abyssal creature will be on a plate on my table. He raises his arms and puts his hands together as if receiving a bounty from the sky, then brings it down to gather. Well, not fish, but a handful of salt water. He looks back at me puzzled. Huh? What's this? It's supposed to taste salty. This is just a dream. Don't expect all the details to be true to life. I suppose so. But how peculiar. We're on the island, aren't we? His island. How come he doesn't remember the taste of water? Maybe he just doesn't care enough about it to appear in the dream. Or maybe what we know about the beach is wrong, and the water isn't salty. That can't be. Teacher insisted that it was salty. Unless it was a lie. But why? I'm just kidding. In any case, let's focus. As you said, this is the place. Silvareth should be nearby. Even if this is his island, we don't know where exactly that is. We'll figure that out as we go. A name, at least, would be nice. But if we don't even get that, it's not a problem. Learning more about the Inquisitor himself is our priority. I see a way to turn the tides in our favor, but whether that works or not hinges on what kind of man he is and what he came to Renai for. His reaction at the farm was promising, but it was not enough. I'm not gambling our fates away. I must make sure that we can use him. And if we can, then we may put an end to Manuel's insanity as well. I try to let Rain understand this, but he's still too excited about the beach to get through to him. He might just be excited, but when I catch a glimpse of his eyes, wide open and disconcerting, I just know that something is off. This is not normal. Not even when diving into Hector's dreams did he react this way. Did Silvareth anticipate that we pull off something like this and prepare some sort of trap that is affecting him now? That shouldn't be possible. Even Irnan got taken by surprise the first time that we dived into his dreams. The Inquisition shouldn't know about the side of the eye. Still, something doesn't feel right. We're walking across the shore when I notice a small figure sitting down on the sand, facing the ocean. A child with brown scales and a quality of eyes I often see in lions. It's only then that Rain seems to calm down, or rather, becomes transfixed by the dragon. I can't blame him. Not when I see the gash going across his stomach. No, that's the wrong word for it. A gash doesn't open and close as though it's breathing. Even though it doesn't make sense, even though it doesn't belong, that thing on his torso is a mouth. My mind races. It shouldn't be possible, should it? It has to be a part of the dream. But suddenly a cascade of details about the Inquisitor falls into place. That smell of saliva, the damp spots, him always carrying a handkerchief in his person. Hell, even fucking with his clothes on to hide it. What does this mean then? No creature in nature should have an anatomy like this. Unless he isn't a being of nature. Unless he is like us. Like us? Rain, afraid that he might overreact and get Silvareth's attention. I take his hand and pull him softly back. Conceal our presence. Make sure he doesn't notice us. Who knows what might happen if he realizes what we're doing. I was wrong, Caddy. What are you going on about now? The fireman. I thought that I knew what he was, but no. I was too short-sighted. Now that we're in this place of his mind, my eyes are open. I see it all. He pulls me closer by the shoulder and whispers. I was wrong about him. He's not a fireman. No? What is he then? God's poison. Blinking, I nod at him and place my hand on his shoulder in return. Does that have anything to do with him joining the Inquisition? Isn't it obvious? It has everything to do with it. God's poison. You can't be more direct and to the point than that. Good. Then tell me what it means. All you need to do is see, brother. I shall act as your eyes. Let us observe the story unfold. The sea, green like the Duke's emeralds, gently caressed the coast. Silvareth looked at the horizon past the twin rocks in search of something, hoping for a response. What form that would take he did not know. Perhaps it'd be a ship, like the one that had crashed into the island's southern coast around 20 years ago. Or perhaps it'd come as a different type of vessel, or even a messenger bird, because he didn't know what form that response would take or when it would arrive. He stared intently. Afraid that he'd miss it, afraid that his elders would intercept it before it reached him, living in uninterrupted anticipation and perpetual disappointment. Such was the way that he'd spend his afternoons, in the rare moments of respite between his lessons. From a young age, Silvareth had known a heavy duty rested upon his shoulders. He saw it in the devotion the villagers, dragons and lions alike, treated him with, how deeply they bowed to him, and how they'd never forget to call him Avatar Silvareth. Never did they use just his name. Every morning he'd be woken up by the servants, would proceed to bathe him and prepare him for his morning classes with Gareth, or Father, as everyone called him. Father, why does everyone else call you that? Are they all my siblings? No, Silvareth. That is just what my position in the village is. Your position? It's my job. It's what I do. Just like I'm a teacher for you. For the others, I am Father. Do you understand? But what do you do? Oh, that's why you lead Mass? That's part of it, yes. There's more that I'll tell you when you're older. There's still much for you to learn about this world, Silvareth. You must be prepared for what you'll face out there. In those days, Silvareth learned all about the world beyond the island. About great cities of stone, castles that rose high into the sky, large masses of arid land called deserts, woods where nature would whisper into one's ear. When the dragon felt inspired, he'd wait for Father to leave during his break to take a pen and write a message. The content didn't matter. It could have been about something tasty that he ate that day, about something fun that he learned in a class, or about some gossip that he heard from the villagers during Mass. What was important is that he'd later put the message in a bottle and let it drift away, and for the rest of the week he'd go to the beach during break, waiting for a response. Under my breath, I repeat the song. The invisibility spell may not truly work while in a dream, but pretending to cast it helps me focus on hiding my presence. Hopefully it reminds Rain to do the same. He's still off, but I think that I understand why. From the moment that we arrived here and our mind began melding with Silvareth's, it's like he understood something that I didn't. Perhaps his greater attunement to the eye helped him perceive the stench of the dark god from the beginning, even before we saw Silvareth's unnatural second mouth. Incredible. Caddy, do you understand what this means? There might be hope for us yet. No more hiding and stalking from the shadows. He looks back at me with the brightest eyes, and I remember the loathsome days when his appearance began changing, and before we let Teresa into the secret. Rain couldn't take the weight or the shrine's walls anymore, and Dad agreed to take him hunting. Naturally, he took that as permission to leave whenever he felt like it, but he really did listen to us and never went close to Renai, or even left during the day. He had decided that the Night Forest would be his territory. He'd be Renai's sole demon, stalking in from the shadows, and despite everything that's happened since, this is still roughly what he is. But Silvareth, he's been touched, just like we are, and yet, not only are the others allowed to see him and talk to him, but he even was accepted by the Inquisition. The Order of the Red Sun, a hope so alluring even Rain, carrying the bulk of our doubts and distrust, can help but stare into its blinding light. Not that I am any better. I certainly hope so, brother. I was already interested in finding out how Silvareth joined the Inquisition, and now even more so. What happened here was vital to him joining it. I'm sure of it. Speaking of the island, I think we know where we are. Oh, how did you figure it out, Caddy? Did you spot a landmass across the horizon? Or did you calculate where we are using the position of the sun? Or the trajectory of the winds? No. Remember the lost continent of Bodos? His ears perked up in realization. Right. The story that they used to read to him. The lost continent of Bodos is an obscure little tale about a group of dragons exiles that made a pact with a group of demons so that they may be allowed to return home. The titular Bodos. By the end of the story, every exile has met a terrible fate, and the demons have gobbled up most of the continent, leaving only a few rocks behind, or an island, if I'm right. It's a popular tale in the Dragon Kingdom, and it arrived to Renai during the Dragonic occupation from centuries ago. But is it the time to discuss such fairy tales? Well, unless you really believe it. Remember what happened when you insisted the Jolly Wolf was real, brother? In the end, we discovered that it was Irnan leaving candy under our pillow, just like I told you. Bodos is just like that, just some made-up place. Don't bring the Jolly Wolf into this. Now let me speak. This is a desolate island inhabited by a cult that's centered around Silvareth, his father, and presumably the dark god that touched him. That reminded me of the story, but what's interesting is that it seems nobody has left the island in at least 10 years. Living in such isolation can't be easy. Even if they're hiding a cult, nothing's stopping a few of them from getting on a ship and trading with their neighbors. Unless they absolutely need to hide the fact that the island is inhabited. And yet their kid grand leader is trying to connect the outside right under their noses. In Renai, we suppress our dark god by telling stories to bastardize its existence. Maybe the lost continent of Bodus is the same. Imagine a catastrophe like the one told in the story actually happened. How many would come to venerate the dark god out of greed or fear? It makes sense to shove it back into the shadows. I say, if this really is Bodus, what remains of it, then we'll find evidence very soon. I agree. Let's take another peek, shall we? From a young age, Silvareth had been voracious, and not just because he ate roughly half his weight in food every day. You'd never see him with a single toy for long. Most children picked a doll, a stuffed animal, or maybe a rock they particularly liked, and then they'd give it a name and play with it for a few years. Not Silvareth. Nothing held his attention for long enough for such attachments to form. One day, he spotted one of his neighbors chiseling away at a piece of wood under their porch. As the block took the shape of a lizard, Silvareth became infatuated with it. He simply walked in, pointed at the figure and said, "Give me that." The old dragon nodded and handed it over without a second thought. It must have been 2 or 3 hours later that somebody saw Silvareth drop the figure on the ground, after which a colony of ants covered every centimeter of it and consumed it entirely. It was the same with friendship. Every few days he'd find somebody else to call uncle or auntie before forgetting all about them and moving on to the next person. Nothing was denied to him, and yet nothing interested him. Still, he was starving. Nothing the adults provided could sate that existential hunger. The world the island represented was far too small to satisfy his appetite. Even though no one was allowed to leave, for some reason Father still thought it necessary to feed him bits of knowledge of the outside. He never questioned it. He was content with taking in the stories about the kingdoms and their cities, the kings and generals. Great wars that had been fought in the past, how the fires ravaged the countryside, including the conquests of Argenitus, the general who had established most of the Dragon Kingdom's southern colonies many centuries ago. And he also learned about how those battles had time and time again pushed natives to seek assistance of hidden powers beyond comprehension. For Silvareth, nature was no god, but an ever-occurring cycle that he, from the comfort of his soft bed, could clearly see and understand. It was a core feature of nature that power would inevitably accumulate in the hands of few, who in their mad greed would create their very circumstances that would push their victims to beckon powers from beyond. Not only did Silvareth learn what a dark god was from a young age, but he also learned that they were tools of justice. Wherever tyranny befell the people, a dark god would reveal itself and offer them an outstretched hand. To the rejected, abandoned children of nature, and that was no lie. No exaggeration, no demonic deceit. Nature, that fickle mother, picked favorites. But even this wasn't enough to stop the terrible Argentus, who would counter the dark god's hell by unleashing his band of mercenary mages, the Inquisition. Thus, Silvareth understood the world was dangerous and unjust, and the island with its faceless, nameless protective god was a utopia. But he still yearned for the excitement that the outside had to offer compared to the dullness of the island life, the endless bi-weekly masses, and the ants that devoured everything in his wake. Then it happened, as if the island had gained consciousness, and its turn had arrived. It made a purposefully and calculated move to indulge the young dragon's appetite. It happened at night. Silvareth was lying in bed with his eyes closed, but feeling restless. He was in a chamber too big and too beautifully furnished to have been given to a kid too young to understand that he shouldn't nibble on the furniture. But by now, he wasn't that kid anymore. Although he had 4 years left to reach adulthood, the innocence in his eyes had vanished. It had been replaced by a hardened look, born from the dissatisfaction and the endless tales of conquest and violence Father imparted. Not only that, he was almost as tall as a fully grown dragon. The only vestiges of his childishness in that room were old nibble marks, and sometimes his belly mouth would chew on the bed sheets while he was sleeping, but that couldn't be helped. Besides him, Father and a couple of servants were the only people who slept in the church, which was why Silvareth woke up completely when he heard a commotion. What's that? He got up and opened the window slightly, just enough to take a peek. Outside, he saw people looking out the windows of their own huts or standing by the door, all looking in the same direction towards a group approaching the church. Silvareth, for the first time in his life, felt a pit in his bottomless stomach. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't recognize those faces. Who are those people? It couldn't be outsiders, right? But there was no other explanation for it. They were huddled and wet. Could there have been an accident at sea? Perhaps a ship was passing by the island, or somebody finally received those messages and came looking for the island. Immediately, Silvareth went to the nave. The strangers gasped in unison upon seeing him, before he could figure out or ask why Father addressed them. Ah, Avatar Silvareth. Good evening, Father. I see we have some guests. How unusual. Yes, we were about to have a talk about what brings them here. Then you won't mind if I join? Father had planned to interrogate the interlopers alone, but upon hearing his son's request, he only needed to think about it for a second before he changed his mind. The five of them sat down at the dining hall, and the strangers told their story. Matthias and Samantha, the two older ones and a married couple, had moved to a colony in search of a better life, only for them to become indebted to a lord. They spent almost 2 decades trying to pay off their debt, but even after their son was born and began working from a young age, they had barely kept up with the interest. In fact, that had made everything worse when the lord considered that the son was indebted as well for being born and raised in his land. Having given up on ever paying what they owed, they instead saved what money they could across 2 years to enact an escape plan. They crossed seemingly hundreds of kilometers in dense jungle and swamps to reach the coast, where a ship had been waiting for them. From there, they didn't know what happened. Maybe the captain had lost his mind, or it couldn't have been an unusual phenomenon in the waters combined with the misty night. Either way, their ship crashed onto the twin rocks. The more Father heard, the more relaxed he grew. A tension that until then Silvareth hadn't noticed was weighing down his shoulders and was released little by little. As for Silvareth, his expression had soured a little the moment that he understood these peoples weren't there because of his messages. They were still outsiders, and that was new and interesting, and that was good enough for now. It was then that he noticed, all along, that the son had not uttered a word. He just looked around the room absent-mindedly, every once in a while stopping to appreciate a piece of pottery or the plates in the display cases. Then their gazes met. They were locked for a moment, until the lion looked down at his belly, making an expression the dragon didn't understand. Silvareth didn't know his age, but, if he had to guess, they were around the same. Much like himself, he was only barely smaller than his parents. The dragon didn't know why his mind went there, but at that moment, at the sight of the boy around his own age, something began to stir, a new unfamiliar hunger. Silvareth was heading to the beach when he noticed something unusual. Standing on the shore looking towards the twin rocks was that lion. Tio was what his parents had called him. The dragon froze on the spot, contemplating his options. What options? What was there to think about? Somebody else was at the beach today, so what? The villagers also showed up here once in a while. It's nothing new. But despite knowing this, Silvareth couldn't move. He just stared at the lion, licking the back of his inner teeth. Tio happened to turn around and notice him. He waved. How rare. No villager had ever directed such a simple gesture at him. But there was something warm and inviting in it. Hey, you're that, avatar guy, that right? Come here, I don't bite. Was he impudent or just ignorant? Nobody had ever talked to Silvareth that way, and yet, he decided to forgive it. Just this once. And all the subsequent times that it happened to. Hello. Tio, is that right? I don't think that we introduced each other. I am Avatar Silvareth. Pleased to meet you, sir. He extended his hand towards the dragon. Silvareth simply looked at it until Tio shrugged and shoved it back into his pocket. What brings you here? I was just admiring the scenery. There was a tinge of sarcasm in his voice, but Silvareth didn't know how to interpret it. I usually come to do just that. Ah, I hope that I'm not getting in the way. I am allowed on the beach, right? I'm still getting used to the rules of this little society you have here. I have terrible manners. I hope that I'm not doing anything wrong. You worry too much. Why would access to the beach be restricted? It's just your father seemed displeased when we asked him if we could leave. What's up with that anyway? You will be able to, eventually. Oh? The day that I succeed father. We'll all finally be allowed to leave. How do you know? Did he tell you that? It's just how it is. The lion nodded with a contemplative smile, and then his gaze wandered off once again to the rocks. Part of the ship's wreckage was still stuck or floating around them. I see. That's how it is then. What a relief. I was worried that you were keeping us here for some ritual. Y'all don't seem very fond of outsiders. What gives you that impression? That father guy and the villagers didn't seem very warm at first, and to be honest, neither did you. That was a nasty glare you had while my parents were telling you what happened. That's because... He hesitated and went silent. Tio then gave his belly a dubious look. What's up with that also? The dragon pointed at his second mouth. This? It was given to me when I was born. It is proof of my destiny as the Avatar. Avatar? It's the first time that I hear about this. Well, yes. Father said that it's a tradition that's been lost outside. It is a blessing from God. Silvareth was sure that he'd calmed down the lion's concerns, but the glare that he received in response shook him. For the first time in his life, he felt the push and pull of a person who would not worship him. The intensity of saying something wrong, the need to somehow undo it, the realization that it could not be taken back, the allure of something fragile and real. The best that he could do was to change the topic and hope that this faux pas would be forgotten, that time would devour his mistake. About why I was glaring at you. You didn't happen to find any messages in a bottle before you arrived here, right? I'm afraid not. I had been hoping you did. You did? Silvareth didn't want to say more about it, but he had already talked too much. At that point, he just wanted to sit down and wait for a response from beyond the sea, but Tio wouldn't let that issue go. What an annoying guy, thought Silvareth. The way he talked, that mocking smile, the way he acted airheaded one moment and then asked sharp questions the next. Simply horrible. And not an ounce of respect. He'd be much better if he just shut up and rested his head on the dragon's lap while they watched the sea. He'd look as pretty as the waves like that. No, even prettier. Terrified of the train of thoughts forming within his own skull, Silvareth yielded to the lion's demands and told him about the messages in the bottle. At times, the lion listened closely. Other times, he got distracted playing by curling his mane around a finger and then tying it up into a tiny braid. But when Silvareth got to the part where he wrote his first message, and then told him about how he'd try to do it every week, a wide smile showed up on his face. Oh, that's cute. It sounds right out of one of those stories my mom likes. Stories? What do you mean? I guess you wouldn't have them here. Do you know what a tavern is? That's where peasants gather to eat or pass time, correct? Well, yes. See, taverns usually have these little guys that play an instrument, like a fiddle, for example, and sing stories. We call them bards. Although some prefer the word poet. Really? Fascinating. Yes, my mom likes the romance stories, you see. There's this one where two lovers were separated, so they communicated with messages in bottles, and because fate willed it, they would always reach their intended destination. It made her crazy. Do you think anyone found mine? With how many you sent? Most likely. Now them coming here is... a naive idea. Well, finding this island can't be easy, even if they felt compelled to come. I see. Silvareth had figured that out long ago, but it frustrated him. He could never write the island's precise location because he didn't know it. That was one of the many secrets that he'd obtained upon succeeding father. But by then, he wouldn't need to put it in a message. He'd simply leave and never come back. Oh, I'm so sorry. I must have bothered you. No. What else can you tell me about the outside? Tio let out a laugh that showed all his teeth, as if Silvareth had just told him the best joke that he'd heard in his life. My. I'm not a bard myself, you know. I just bore you to death. I don't care. Silvareth just wanted to hear his voice. You've got a hard time taking no for an answer, huh? He had never known rejection, and now it captivated him. Look who's talking. With a grin, the lion got up and began walking away. Silvareth's eyes opened wide and quickly followed him. Where do you think you're going? I just thought that I needed some time to think it over. You say that you don't care, but I bet if I tell you something boring, you'll stare daggers at me again. No, I promise I'll stop doing that. Well, I'm not doing it on purpose to begin with, but I'll try to stop. I just want to hear what you have to say. Please. A salty wind passed between them, ruffling Tio's mane. The lion fixed his hair, looking off to the side. I'll think of a good story for you. Come back tomorrow, okay? Yes, of course. Tio fulfilled this promise. The next day they met at the beach, and he told Silvareth a story about a farmer that he had helped cheat at a game of cards once. It was nothing out of the ordinary, nor was it particularly exciting, and yet each pause made Silvareth hold his breath, and every time he'd raise his voice, as he told what happened next, the dragon's eyes would light up. But what else could be expected from a boy who only had ever been taught to eat, whose world seemed so disposable, so transitory? Of course, Tio himself was ignorant of all of this, so all he could do was pity the dragon, this large, imposing man who could not control his angry stare, and who, despite his size and dignified speech, still at times seemed so innocent as a child. Although he didn't understand that being the island's avatar entailed, he figured that it was good to have Silvareth as an ally. He and his parents had already been told by father that leaving the island was forbidden. That quiet shift in his parents' eyes made it clear that they didn't intend to abide by that rule. But until they had a plan, they needed to blend in. Which wasn't too difficult. The hut was big enough for the family, and the villagers made sure that they never lacked any implements or food. I don't like it. It's like they're trying to buy our trust. Matthias and Tio agreed with the sentiment. Regardless, they started attending mass with the rest of the villagers. It was the one thing father asked of them, after all. Tio didn't like that development, and he wasn't shy about letting Silvareth know. I don't get it. Is a ceiling and a few meals all it takes to sway them? Or did your dad's sermons get to them? Sermons? He was going on and on about coming from a colony, a horrible place full of venomous critters where it rained only once a year. Is that all true? It's what he's been telling me since I understood him. Why? Do you think he's lying? I don't know if it's a lie, but it sure is convenient. Father is a natural leader. You've seen how many people he got to come live on the island with him. You mean the villagers? All of them came with him? Silvareth raised an eyebrow, not understanding which part of what he had just said was so strange that it had clouded Tio's expression. Well, yes. Why is it that, after so long, you're the only one who has ever been born here? See? Going to mass and praying to God is good, but this island is so strange to me. Why can't we leave? Why is nobody having children? I don't want to call your daddy a liar, but there's just something wrong with this place. Doesn't it bother you that he's hiding stuff from you? Don't you want to know what he's raising you for? Of course it does, but he already promised that he'll reveal everything at the right time. Right. What am I doing, complaining about the priest to his own son? Maybe I'm starting to lose my mind too. Teal leaned back and let himself fall into the sand with his eyes closed. Silvareth, meanwhile, was stunned into silence as he tried to come up with anything to improve the lion's mood and restore his absent-minded smile, only to draw a blank. He disliked that father had made him upset. He disliked how much he hated the island, because even if he was also wanting to leave, Silvareth was still a part of it. I'm sorry. I'll talk with father about it. Will you? The lion got on his knees, looking at Silvareth with perked ears and bright eyes. I can't promise anything yet, but, I like you, and I don't want to see you unhappy. Isn't that sweet of you? But really, thank you. Preparations for the church's dinner started 6 hours in advance, always. The servants would bring all the fish that they had captured that day, as many fruits as they could find, all the dough that they had left rising the day before, and all the honey that farmers would send them. It was a banquet that would serve at least 10 people, but it was only for father and the Avatar. Of course, the latter was the one who consumed most of it by the end of the night. Looking at the abundance on Silvareth's side of the table, one would guess that he was father's superior rather than the other way around. Usually the silence at the time of the dinner was only broken by Silvareth's munching. Not knowing how to start the conversation, Silvareth just went to the point. Father? Yes, Avatar? I've been thinking about the family that recently joined us. What about them? Isn't it possible to let them leave? They will be allowed to leave once you succeed me, naturally. Father looked down at his plate and put another piece of meat in his mouth, but Silvareth wasn't done talking. I mean to let them go now. You know where the island is, so why not let them take a boat and draw them a map? Father? I already answered your question. The family has been integrating well, the son aside. But soon he'll give up as well. It won't be a problem. Now eat. Why are we not allowed to leave? Avatar, do you enjoy dinners like these? Yes. The mountain of food that you are enjoying is only possible because we're following the mandate laid out by God. If you were to betray those mandates, you and everyone on this island would suffer. Even the strangers, foreigners ignorant of our ways, are coming to accept God's blessing. Why can't his avatar do the same? It's all that's being asked of you. Focus on your duties and all the answers shall present themselves to you. Silvareth wasn't satisfied, but he was well aware of the stubbornness flowing in his veins that comes from his father. Arguing further would get him nowhere. For once, he had to control his hunger. He spent the next days thinking of the ship father and the others had arrived in. He wasn't sure if it still existed. It might have been dismantled for materials at some point. But if it did exist, he doubted father just abandoned it to rot in some remote part of the island. Most likely villagers were sent every once in a while to maintain it, so it'd be ready when the time to leave arrived. If he could figure out who that was and follow them, he may be able to find it. However, when he told Teal of that idea, the lion quickly noticed several flaws. A ship of that size Silvareth described would be very difficult to man for a crew of 3 inexperienced sailors. 4, Silvareth thought on impulse. And even if they could do it, they still needed father's cooperation to reach the mainland, not only to know how to reach it, but also to secure supplies needed for the trip. The dragon was gritting his teeth as he stomped circles around the church's nave one afternoon. Everything was fucked. He didn't know what to do. Why couldn't his father just speak clearly? What was he hiding, and why was he such a liar? He made it sound like it was so easy for Silvareth, as if he had any choice. Did his father believe that it made him happy that the villagers looked at him like he was a thing attached to his second mouth rather than the other way around? Yes, thank you for all the offerings, you fake, self-interested pieces of shit. And his hunger. Silvareth just couldn't stop eating, but he didn't mean to be that way. Rather, it was like somebody had scooped up a sense of restraint, or perhaps a fullness, that everyone else had. There was this gaping hole where something else was meant to be, yes. Why couldn't he feel content? Why was everything so unsatisfying? And now, there was this hole in his heart too that told him to make Tio happy, even if it made himself unhappy. He didn't understand. He wanted to grab the line, hold him close until the two of them became unrecognizable from one another, but he was also trying to help him get away. It doesn't make sense. So hungry, and so stupid too. Why did Tio need to tell him the most basic things when he pointed out that they still needed to know where they were and food as well? Silvareth felt like such a moron. Why couldn't he be smart like Tio? Why couldn't he be as curious? He didn't understand a thing and didn't know what questions to ask either. If only Tio wanted to sit by the beach in his arms, then maybe he'd be able to do that. Yeah, that's all that he was good for, eating and sitting around. Damn it. He kicked the altar with such force one would expect it to shatter into pieces. Silvareth remained still with one foot on the stone slab for what felt like hours. Then, from behind the altar, a tiny black head poked out, wiggling its antennae in the dragon's direction before walking past his foot and down. It joined a line of black ants heading out of the church and making a turn to the right. Silvareth observed the trail disappear behind the doors, and then, feeling an invisible pull, walked out. He followed them to a path cutting through the grass and trees behind the village. Through the twisted turns and vegetation, the ants never left the path or Silvareth's vision. He knew where this led. It had been a while since Father had taken him there, but the moment that he saw it, it all came back to him. Beyond the forest lay the end of the world, a black pit not even the sun at its peak could illuminate. Silvareth stood at its edge, looking into the nothingness below. God was resting somewhere down there. At least that's what Father said. But he must have been telling the truth about that, because why else would the ants burrow under the ground then? Yes, whatever Silvareth discarded also probably ended up in this pit. The dragon followed the trail of ants as he went around the pit, and then further into the forest. Huh? What's this? The path continued into a lonesome building, sitting among the trees. Upon first laying his eyes upon it, Silvareth thought of the church back in town. This one was much smaller but still retained an air of dignity. He almost felt hesitant to push the doors open, almost as if he was intruding upon a place too holy for even the Avatar. Perhaps God didn't dwell within the pit, but inside those walls. Silvareth steeled his resolve and pushed the stone doors open. The church was nothing like what he expected. Nowhere did he find rows of pews, a long carpet or flowers sitting by the windows. Instead, it was almost like a small arena. A circular fence delineated the center of the nave, a circular sturdy pole standing tall and proud in the middle. It seemed so clean too. Had somebody been here recently? Or perhaps the house of God didn't accumulate dust. As he walked in, he noticed the altar behind the fence and beyond it, a writhing black mass of ants underneath which hid a large statue. It called for him, and he answered by walking up to the altar, trying to find the statue's eyes. Then he heard a crack and a piece of its face fell off. The ants stopped, and for a second most of them dispersed as quickly as when they burrowed into the earth. Silvareth didn't know what creature he was looking at, and he couldn't see beyond the dark that resided in the crack in the statue's face. But he did feel watched. Is somebody there?
Avatar, Silvareth.
It wasn't a voice he recognized, and yet it seemed so familiar, the sound alone soothing something deep within him.
I've been aching to meet you.
Who are you? Could you be God?
I am what your kind calls a demon. I am a messenger of your God. I was supposed to be awakened in a few years, but it seems you've been led astray. Unfortunate, but Gareth is just a man, after all.
Are you talking about Father? What do you mean?
He's too attached to his pride to see that concessions can be mutually beneficial. You must not forget our God's face, to fulfill your duties and to indulge in your desires. That is one and the same. But such a simple truth confuses you.
I don't understand what you're saying, but are you implying Tio is the one that led me astray?
Indeed.
I don't see how that's true. I want to help him. That's the truth.
It's not. If you wanted to help him, then why does the thought of him leaving make you agonize so? You do not want him to go, but in your mind, helping him do so keeps him close. If you told him to stay, to become assimilated in your way of life, he'd despise you. You're confusing your attempt to achieve your desires for your desire itself.
Silvareth fell silent. His indignation told him to argue against the demon, but he couldn't find any flaws in what he was saying. That was exactly what it was. How do you know this?
I know every truth in the heart of mortals. That is a demon, and that is why I'm your people's guide. Your kind misunderstands themselves and the world around you. You see mirages, or even purposefully fabricate illusions, and spiral ever deeper into confusion. Thus, I am here to dispel said illusions, and guide you to the path God will reward. And many rewards are awaiting you, Silvareth, including Teal's company.
How then? What should I do to keep him with me?
Gareth is right that you must focus on succeeding him. However, as things are now, your relationship with Teal will deteriorate when he sees you prioritize your studies. He'll think you've given up on him. The best result will be to complete your training as Avatar as soon as possible.
I suppose that could work. Should I just tell Father that I am ready then?
No. Nobody, not even God, will accept that. However, there is a ceremony that will bring you closer to him. If you do that, if you can fully become his Avatar through that, then you will be accepted.
And Teal will be able to leave?
Once you are complete as the Avatar, nobody will defy your word. If you wish to allow somebody to leave, it will be done.
And the ceremony, what is it exactly?
You will need to commune with God. It will be done through the consumption of a mixture that can only be created on this island. For a moment, you will feel that you are him, and that he is you. A little more time will be needed to prepare the ceremony, but soon you shall be a true Avatar.
So that's where I'm going to leave it for today. So we're getting a lot of backstory for Silvareth. We're seeing that he was actually born on an island. He disliked being on the island. But we're also seeing that, at least to me, it seems that he had kind of like a crush. And he just didn't know how to... Or he didn't know what it meant, I guess. It also kind of seems like perhaps his situation is very similar to what maybe Cadgan and Rian are going through, which is probably why they're spying on him right now. They're trying to figure out what type of person he is and if they can trust him or not, or if they can at least use him. There appears to be a dark god there, and he has his own demon, or at least a thing that appears to be a demon. But yeah, probably not a very good idea to be trusting it. I mean, even if Rian likes to claim that he is a demon, I am very dubious about that, that claim now. knowing him more, or at least knowing him when he is with Cadgan, who he's been growing up with, I guess. But that might be because he has Cadgan's emotions and everything else, so he is more human than any demon that we have seen so far, which is only 2, apparently. Anywho, so I'm pretty sure that whatever the demon and, I guess, Gareth have in stored is probably not a very good thing for Silvareth. And maybe even Tio. But anyway, so what are your thoughts so far? Comment down and, we'll discuss it. And thank you all for watching / listening. If you'd like to play Devil's Gambit yourself, you can do so by going down to the link in the description, which will have a direct link for the itch.io page where you can download the game and play it yourself, and they do have a Patreon in case you want to support the project. All of those things will be linked down in the description, along with the link for the channel members in case you don't see it. It does help support the channel. Also, Ko-fi in case you want to support through there, and Throne in case, book me, bye. Anyways, but yeah, so I guess that's it for now, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.